Okay, my outstanding friends, this is going to be a lot of fun. We're going to be talking about Devil's Tower, volcanism, body parts, tendons, and questions that people have asked me about. You know, a lot of people think these things are trees, a giant tree that was cut down. Well, we need to look at the evidence to support each side. Now, I'm going to show you things that I thought was a tree, and it may not be a tree, and things that I thought weren't trees may be trees. It depends on the condition that they're in, and the type of transition metals that are there, and how long they're in the water for, the pH, the temperatures, all that. And everything was in a great flood. Now let me show you about Devil's Tower there, because it is Triassic, and all my stuff is Triassic. Basically all my stuff, and they all came from the Great Flood, just as that did. All right, let's just start with the Devil's Tower. That is the calcaneal heel of a tendon. All right, let's just start with Devil's Tower. This is the calcaneus, which is really the Achilles heel, and it's a round ball, and from that comes up a stalk of fibers. These fibers are these fibers. All right, this guy's crawling around. You see all this wrinkly looking stuff? That's what they call small leucine-rich proteins, Slurpees. And you see over here how it's peeling off right up here? This is like a coating on these fibers. I have a fiber here of this same sort of stuff. Mine didn't wrinkle because gravity sort of wrinkled it down, because it's what they call Slurpee. Well, I'll show you mine. Hold on. All right, you should be able to see. You see the difference between here and here? That's the Slurpee that the tendon sits inside of. This is a tendon fiber as well. And there was a tiny bit of blood. There's very, very little bit of blood in tendons, but that I think you can see the blood ran down here because it died laying like this. Now, this didn't wrinkle up like that because it wasn't laying like this. All right, this is like a really floppy stuff, so that your tendons can do this and do that and move back and forth amongst themselves and still stay the way they are. Now this is the wrinkle zone at the top, and like I said, that's the heel. And this is exactly what Devil's Tower is. That's the calcaneal, the heel, the Achilles tendon heel. There's no bone in there. And out comes that fiber. Now, normally that would be bundled right together. I'll show you in a second. And you see that right there? These are the abrupt transitions. You see those little fibers, all those fibers? Those are the fibers you're seeing basically in right here. All right, and that's the heel, the heel, you could call it a bone if you want. It's the calcaneal tendon heel, emphasis for all these fibers. And I'll show you the anatomical. All right, see this here? That's the Achilles tendon. It's the ball at the end. And then it comes up like in a little roundish looking thing, and then it comes up all those fibers. When it snaps, you get this wrinkle effect. You see that? That's the wrinkle zone right there, because they're under tension. They're always straight and tight and under tension. They're very, very tight attachment to your calf down to that bone. And that keeps your foot together, literally. All right, so this is that wrinkle zone. These are the fibers. That's that little wraparound spot to the tendon, to the calcaneal Achilles tendon. Now you see the green coming out of here? there's going to be some red blood up in this here area that's coming out, because green is moss, and green moss loves red blood, and that's why this stuff is growing down here at the bottom, all around here. And the reason is that because there's little blood vessels we're here that service the, like just basically skin that was around this. You don't have much. Well, let's look at the anatomical again. Anatomical. You see right in this here, you got almost nothing, because there's breaks right up here. So, whatever is around here will just erode it away. Now, I showed you this. These are square tendons. And I think this could very well have also been from an Achilles tendon. I broke this off a long time ago from a longer piece. So I don't know what it was from, but it appears to be a tendon. And it's the square style. Now there's other ones that aren't square. There's the hex ones. Alright, this one blows my mind every time I see it. They claim this is from volcanic activity and it just cooled down and caused these things. Well, I say no, these are tendon fibrils. Now, look at the hex looking shapes. They're not all exactly hex. Like, see this one here has got 5 sides and some of them have 6, and they're pretty close though. Now, look at this. This is tendon as well. Same sort of thing. This is what a tendon is. All right, this is called a rope style tendon, and they're the big round big ones, and you see these in nature as well. Now, inside of each parts of these ropes, there's the square ones, which are like these. All right, and they will square up next to each other in a whole batch of squares, basically. Then inside of these, and there's literally thousands of them, there's these bundles. You see that? That's a tiny little dot in there. There's all over this whole thing is these. And these are where you have your hex primarily. You see them? Now out of these come the hex, and there's another zillion little balls coming out of here, fibers. And then out of there's another zillion. And out of there's another zillion. There's hundreds of thousands of these fibers, basically. Now, where do they go? They end up going to a ball. Every one of them attaches to a ball at the very, very end, which locks it in position. All right, extremely simplified. This is the muscle, tendon, all the fibrocartilage, and then the fibrocartilage attached to all these little balls, and that's in the bone. So that gives you your anchor for your tendon, and that abruptly transitions into the muscle. All right, you got it? Remember all these fibers going down to all these little balls, and there's a couple different types of balls as they come down and get deeper and deeper into the bone. All right, we got a lot to go over, but for right now, Devil's Tower is a tendon, Achilles tendon, and it breaks off according to the abrupt transition right here, and you get the wrinkle zone. And it's not just at Devil's Tower. They're all over the place, the wrinkle zones. There's another one right here. This is Devil's Post Pile. They always want to throw a devil in there. You see the wrinkle? Where it approaches some stress point and it gives off. That's what happens. Now, this was like a shoulder or something. This is not an Achilles tendon. But you can see all of the little wrinkly stuff. So wherever it was under tension, it wrinkles more. Where it was less tension, it wrinkles less. That's all. But they are still tendon fibrils. All right, so you saw about all the little straps and fibers coming down, and these are the balls that they lock into. Now, there's 2 different styles of tendon, basically. There's the rope style, which works with the regular tendons from bones to muscles and ligaments, and they invest into bones like that. Now, then you have the aponeurosis style, which they're not showing it here, but it lays flat in sheets. See, this is the aponeurosis style tendon. They're flat, but they attach to muscle just like any other tendon does. And the muscle pulls against the tendon, and the tendon is the really tough, rubbery part that just barely moves, and the muscle does this and that. And they're all over your abdomen, your back. It's all in the back area. So I just showed you all those little balls. At the end of all of these is going to be a little tiny ball that they hook into. And then they come back and back. And when they break flat as a pancake, because there's little separations on every one of these fibers. You can't see them. Hold on, I think I have a good shot. Hold on. You see this? This is how many little blocky things there is. These are the tendon fibrils, and there's thousands and thousands and thousands. Now, that little block right there is this block over here. Remember, they come down and they break into more and more and more little tabs. That's these. You see what they're called? Collagen fibrils. Collagen. These are collagen. Any connective tissues are made of collagens. And you see all the different colors? There's like 28 different collagens, at least. And they all have a different chemistry, means a different color. And they are in bundles, they can become extremely strong because they're covering all their bases. Now, this is electron microscopy. This is you know, this is way down there. Now, this, if you can see, they're all little blocks. You see? Just like those were all little blocks. Even though the tendons, you don't, but I'm going to tell you one thing right now. I think Devil's Tower, the straight part, is not blocks. But I can't really prove that. I do know as it wraps around the bottom, they turn into blocks. But I think on the straight up, they're like this and no blocks. And I think this might have had no blocks, this one here. Because the blocks are very tight. You see how close they are together? I would have expected this to have a block here and a block here, you know, and I'm not finding anything like that. And I broke this off, and the other piece brings it out about this far. So I think that's, this particular one here would have been basically from the long fiber, like here. You see down here? This is the wrinkle zone, but they're not broken up into little tiny blocks. They're just wrinkled. Now, down here, I don't see all kind of blocks, but once you get down at the very bottom, it's all blocky again. It gets real blocky. Just like what I just showed you a second ago. This kind of blocky. See this? I showed you that thing of the tendons, the different colors, and the blocks, how close they are. There they are. That's it. That's a tendon fibrils. And that's exactly what I just showed you over here. Same stuff. And that's why they show different colors, because they're different collagens, and they're still wrapped in the same bundle. Alright, I just got this from a friend of mine, Marushko, and this is Marushko's Mud Fossil Mysteries. And, you know, he's just getting started. He's got 21 subscribers, and he's showing stuff. Now, I'm looking at this, and I'm saying, I think I know what this is. And I'll show you in a second. It's highly eroded, but I will show you in a second. Now, he's showing all this stuff and all this, and this is all biology. You know, it's different forms of biology, but a body has a ton of different biological areas and different biological formations.
So I think these he already showed on Mount Foster University.
See this?
I believe he went over this.
He's talking about water and erosion. Some of this stuff, you know, I'm not sure I'm going to be 100% with. But he's got a couple of good shots here and there. You know, you see all this. This is all over the West. They didn't just create these. This is biology. Let me just put it that way. That's biology.
I don't know if this is the part that looks like stomach lining tissue.
You see it? Look at this.
These are interesting though. They showed another park. I don't know where.
This is what I'm really interested in seeing. This kind of stuff. Look at this. Look at that. Now that, I'm not sure what that is, but I can tell you what, I'm almost certain it's connective tissue. And between it was the fleshy sort of stuff. How big and what area in the body it was, I don't know. But you see where all this green stuff is growing? That grows on bloody runoff.
These are interesting though. They showed.
You see it? These are all bloody runoff. There's so much amazing stuff out there. It's just out of control. All right, you see this? A ridge of red sandstone rocks. How would that happen? There's no geological process that would do this. This is apparently from the Smithsonian Channel. But Marushko is showing and questioning these things, which we should. All right, he's talking about there's over 2,000 arches in Arches National Park. You see these? I'm going to show you what these things are. And they are, you see all these crazy looking structures? And I talked to you about a aponeurosis tendon before. And I am going to show you that this is related to a aponeurosis tendon. All right, and all these little crazy looking things sticking up. Nobody understands any of this stuff. Look at this. Look at this. Look at that. Nobody's got a clue. Let me show you. In everybody's body, in every creature's body, there's all kinds of different structures. And I talked about the aponeurosis tendon. What we were just looking at is that. All right, I know I showed you that all of these tendons have a bazillion little fibers, and those fibers hook up to the muscles. But those fibers have to anchor into something, and it's called an aponeurosis sheet. All right, so in this sheet, these straps come down, and then the ball locks in, and then there's a... All right, you see this right here? This is a tendon. You see how perfectly flat and squared off it is all the way around, the nice flat surfaces. That's the way certain tendons are. They're like blocks like this. Now, this died laying flat like this, I know, because you see this blood? I don't know if you can see the color, but that color is the color of the blood, and it's run down to here. All right, up at the top you can hardly see any, but you can see these little white fibers. I don't know if you can see them from where you are. Hold on. Well, you probably can't see that, but there's a bunch of little white fibers in there. And then there is also a border around it, which is what's called a slurpee. You see this color right here? That orange looking color? It's seamed right to there, and this could slide within this. I see. I don't know if you can even see this, but there's a little ridge there. This one's pretty pristine, but sometimes this slurpee will just fall right off, and that's the case on Devil's Tower. There's places where it's just falling right off, and I'll show you. And it's wrinkled up because it's been standing, and it wrinkles down. You'll see that. And then you'll see the tendon inside the slurpee. So that'll be missing or wrinkled down, but you'll see it in a minute. And inside this, there's more little bundles, and all of those little white fibers, there, they're all tendon fibers. And they run down, and they meet up with some kind of an enthesis, which is an anchor ball at the end, and you know, and they're just gigantic. In us, that's very microscopic. All right, I'd like to start with the clincher right from the beginning. Don't forget, I showed you this. I put a little water on there, and you might be able to see the blood stain there now. With that water on there, I think you should be able to see that all right. You see where the blood is coming down here, and it actually gets down to the bottom. Let me back this off. It's a little bit shiny. That's the problem. You put water on it, and it brings out the colors, but it gets shiny. All right. I don't know if you'll be able to see that or not. But anyway, this is that Slurpee around the outside. The center is able to move within that Slurpee, and all the white little things are fibers, and that's the blood ran down to there. Now it's upside down, but you see where the darker red is? There's a little bit of blood in it, tendons, but not much at all. Now this one here is just as flat as a pancake because it just died laying flat like this. Now, Devil's Tower died like this. All right, and all that Slurpee slid down literally. And here it is right here. That's the Slurpee right there. That's this stuff. And it's sliding down and peeling off. This guy's better be damn careful. Now, this is the kind of tendon that is Devil's Tower, and this is the tendon that I believe it was in like a real strong foot area. I believe this is from Achilles tendon. That's my take on it. I don't know. But I know there's all the different hexagonal ones and all the different patterns. But this is a special deal, or maybe not, I don't know. But it's a square one. All right, and so are these. They're basically the same as this. Only mine, the Slurpee didn't slide down. That one there did. So here's another shot of it. This guy's climbing up. This stuff peels off. That's the Slurpee, and because of gravity, it sort of was wet when the guy died, and it sort of came down. You see this here? He's peeled right off. These guys are crazy. Now, this is a perspective you almost never get. Devil's Tower going this way. That right there is the heel. Okay, my friends, I have been doing a lot on anatomy, because until you understand anatomy, you can't understand biology and geology. Now, I am talking about Devil's Tower. And I'm going to tell you right now, this is what I feel Devil's Tower is that right there. Is the heel bone, and it breaks the tendon. Now, it broke up a little higher on Devil's Tower, but this is what they call the wrinkle zone. And it's where the tendon, which is normally a lot of stress on that, boing, and you get a wrinkle there, and the ball has all these fibers running up. Now, let me show you what a real Achilles tendon looks like. All right, there's your heel. All right, so this is your heel bone. It's not really a bone, but anyway. These are the fibers that come out. This is the Achilles tendon. It's all splayed back, but normally that's in a bundle coming up to meet the muscle. And they are tough. And I don't think there's any little breaks in them like there is in other. And I think I showed you this, but I'll show you again. It might have been in the last video, because like I said, I've been doing a lot on trying to make people understand what they're seeing, because they're seeing huge things and saying, how could this square block be like that? That's just impossible. Well, no, it isn't. All right, once again, this is sarcomeres. These are muscle sarcomeres. This is a stone, and that's the surface of the stone. This is cut straight down. So this would have been flesh. Then this would have been muscle, and this is blood servicing the muscle. And they're called sarcomeres. Right? These are the sarcomeres. This is a contracted muscle, and this is relaxed. And these are exactly what I just showed you. And these are also at Petra, because Petra is just another gigantic creature that petrified. All right, you see this? These are the sarcomeres right here. I showed this, if you go back in a couple of my videos, I've been really pushing this hard. Now, you see this? That's the layer on the top, the layer on the bottom. That's the sarcomere right there, which is the one I just showed you. They're all up and down here. Now, when there was people standing in front of here, they only come up to about here. They only come up to about here. They stand about here. You need a very good microscope, a electron microscope, to see these sarcomeres in a human body. These are tiny. And the people only come up maybe a quarter of the way up one of these, maybe not even that much. All right, like I said, I'm not going to get into extreme detail here because I did it. I just put up videos about this, but this is where the blood would have run. These are muscle sarcomeres. This whole thing is all muscle. This whole thing. You see that? That whole thing. And this is where it would have transitioned from the muscle into, I believe, probably the tendon would have come up above, or bone, I'm not sure what. But it's a definite transition zone from here to here. And it shows above Petra. I got it showing somewhere here. Here it is right here. There's Petra on the bottom, and up above at the top is just connective tissue. And like I say, muscles end up going to connective tissue somewhere. And that's it right there, up above. So now think of what I just showed you, Petra. Those muscle sarcomeres, those things are just so small, you can't even hardly see them. So when I say Giant's Causeway, I mean, well, Giant's Causeway is some kind of a creature too. I don't know what. I showed that too. This is Giant's Causeway. All of this stuff is body tissue. It's all, in this case, it's muscle. And all I can say is Jesus Christ said the earth is a corpse, and I can guarantee you that he's pretty accurate on that as far as I can tell. Now here's again the tendon, which has, I don't think there's any blocks in there, and I can show you a couple of examples to sort of, I think, support what I'm saying. I don't think there's any blocks. I think those are continuous, you know, they'll break, but they're continuous fibers. That's my take at this moment. All right, this is what a normal tendon looks like. There's no real give to it. These are pretty solidly locked together, but there's different types of material in there, different molecular formula to these. You see the different colors? That means there's something's different about them. There are different types of collagens in the same bundle. And you see how tiny they are? Look at what they show here. All right, let me focus in so you can see better. You see the tendon over there on the left? All of these are these little fibers in the tendon. Now, this is what they call a rope style tendon. It's round and it comes up and attaches to something. Now, I believe there's rope style tendon in the body, in like your shoulders and where you have to do a lot of flexing and moving, and they have to be very flexible. But I think the one in the Achilles tendon doesn't have to be flexible. It's just straight up and down. That's it. It doesn't go this way or that way. It's always under tension. And I think they cut out the blocks. But you see all the different colors here? This little tiny block right there, that tiny little thing, which is in one of these fibers, is this. In that block is all of those fibers. You see that? Can you imagine how, and that's the collagen, see collagen fibrils, and all those different colors represent different chemistry. Different chemistry means different collagen. And that gives us that strength. I mean, there's a ton of strength here. Now, in a general, in the Achilles tendon, I don't think they have the blocks. And I'm going to show you why I can make that statement. Okay, first of all, you can see they're blocks just like this. And the only reason that broke is because I broke it, and not some broke somewhere along the line. That is not a separation zone. Now, because I have another piece to this that goes about that long. Now, this has a Slurpee that just laid flat on there, but you can see the actual Slurpee here that surrounds the inside. Now that's this right here. You see that? That's this. This is Slurpee has drifted down this way because it's, you know, that's supposed to be like a coating where you walk and your fibers can go up and down in these coatings. So they're all independent. Now this is falling off of here. That's precarious. I don't care what you say. That's precarious. Now here's another shot. I don't see any breaks, anything. The Slurpee, yes, it's all over the place. And this is where some more is falling off. And again, crazy, crazy people. Now, when you see this moss growing here, it's usually going to be in an area where the sun hits in a certain way, and it is also, it grows on biological things. Anytime you see little plants and things growing, there was some kind of red blood right there. This is probably from, it's from the Slurpee. All right, I have stuff that have things growing in them here that have been sitting inside for 10 years, have no water or anything. And they still got stuff growing in them because there's blood inside of them. All right, so when you see the moss, the red, I mean the real green moss and green plants, and fluffy things come, that is red blood almost always. This is almost always towards the vein side. It doesn't have that red blood part which makes things grow. You buy blood meal, and blood meal is sold as to make things grow green and fast, and it does. This is different. That's a different blood, but it is still bloody fluid, and that's what they're living on. All right, so you saw Exhibit A and Exhibit B, no fractures. Now we're going to see something that is an Achilles tendon laying on the ground where they had excavated this in the ancient days and removed slabs of this to build these walls in the back. All right, let your mind settle into that for a second. Somewhere they were cutting these slabs, and this was wet when they were doing it. I'm almost 100% sure, because that's how they molded these into these walls in the back. That's going to be another video. I got a lot of evidence on this, and I can show you the machines that they had that did this work. Now, the reason I'm showing you this right now is because that's an Achilles tendon, and there's no breaks in it. There's no little chunks in it. They're like there is at a lot of other places where it's muscle, or well, it's muscle and tendon. They both have little, muscles have the sarcomeres, tendons just have the little blocks. There's no real stretch to them, but they're blocks. Let's just go over that one more time, because that is confusing to people. You see these blocks? These can pinch. That's how a muscle does this. It pinches in and it stretches out, pinches in, stretches out. These can do this. Now, that's a muscle. All right, and it needs a ton of red blood to do its work. Now this is a tendon. It doesn't need any blood at all, basically, virtually none. It's almost zero, and these blocks do not move. They're just stacked tight together, and they're just really glued together, just unbelievably tight. When they break, though, they fracture on these planes. All right, now. You can see the different colors, means there's different molecular structure to it, which one of them gives a strength going this way. I don't know. They're different. For some reason, your body created it that way. And so I'm telling you something right now. I have a very hard time believing that this just all happened by accident. There was just some accidental thing where a bunch of goop turned into this. No, a million times. No. Okay, so we got Exhibit A, Exhibit B, Exhibit C, all the way down to Exhibit 27. All right, what do we got here? Same thing. Tendons. The kids are having a good time sliding on them. They're walking up, they're just going to slide on them like a slide. Now, they've been doing this for some kind of time. You see how it's all smoothed up, but there is no breaks across them. And this is an Achilles tendon too. I'm almost 100% sure of that. Well, I'm pretty sure of it. Let me put it that way. And this is the Slurpee stuff. It's pretty much worn off. And there's a lot of areas where all the Slurpee is gone. It depends on where it was and how it weathered in. But when I get into the stuff down in Peru and show you those walls and those bumps and all that stuff, I've done this before, but it's getting more and more clear as I keep going back at it. So, you know, if you've seen it before, that's fine. Just it's up to you to watch or not. But I normally do add a little more juice to it that I missed in the beginning or whatnot. Like this here. You see that? That's a tendon. And this right here is the anchor of the tendon. See how gorgeous that is? And how flared it comes out right here? This is the first abrupt transition. I always talk about abrupt transitions. This is anchored right in here. All right, so this went to something that probably did this, because that's the pivotal anchor. And it flared out to meet whatever muscle was here. And the muscle probably came to somewhere in here and has just eroded off and fallen off, mostly. Now, so you got abrupt transition, you got another abrupt transition, and you've got all the fibers going out to meet the muscle. And pretty much this is the muscle area where it's starting right here. And you want to see why I can say that? You see that? You see those? These are junctions. What that means is you got this here, literally almost exactly the same, coming out to meet up with something else and be sliding against this. This is the Slurpee. That's the Slurpee right there. That is the Slurpee. That's it. And everything has to move and gush around and do all that, but you've got to have some really heavy-duty, tough stuff. Remember I talked about all the little white spots? I don't know if you can see them or not, but they're there. And that's where the blood is. It drained basically down this direction. I'm pretty much getting on top of most of this stuff now. But these are all these little white dots are all tendinous fibers. So that thing probably rocked this way, that way. It could be a shoulder or who knows what. These things were gigantic, absolutely gigantic. But you can see the transition. Well, you see all the different transitions, but you can see the Slurpee all around here. All right, and there's tight junctions and loose junctions. Now, I can see these are junctions. These are not fractures. Whenever you see that little lippy looking stuff around it, that's a junction. So this is trying to transition from tendon into muscle. And the muscle just falls apart. All right, so let's get back to Devil's Tower. And I'll tell you, if you look at it from different perspectives, boy, it looks like a completely different thing. But this one here, I've never seen any other shots like this. This is from a guy flying in a plane. And of course, this is the actual fibers. Now, this is the wrinkle zone at the top. And that's where it snaps, boing, and it wrinkles up right at the top. This is where the ball, what they call a calcaneal, or calcaneus, is that ball. And then the Achilles tendon goes up to where it would have met the muscle up above. And of course that's gone. But the red stuff all around us is just saturated with red stuff, and all of that green is growing because of that red stuff. And even these little spots here, you see that? All of those would have been little tiny blood vessels. They come up around the edge to bring the blood up to the muscle and the flesh that surrounded that. You see how they're growing in there? That's what happens. They grow in where you got some blood. Everything wants to grow in where there's blood. All right, so here's another shot. Here's the wrinkle zone at the top. Very, very obvious. This is totally different than this here. Now, once again, I look at this as closely as I can, not actually being there. You see some that look like there might have been some breaks, but not enough to make it like the other ones were. Now, you see here, there's red blood coming out of here. See that? That's red blood. That's why this is growing green. If that wasn't red blood, you'd have like moss, like I showed you before. Now, you see this here? Now you got some wrinkle. Now you got, wherever it has to bend, it goes into those little blocks. I believe that's what's going on here. Wherever there's a bend, you end up with blocks. Where there's no bends, it's just a straight piece. Now, I'd like to have an anatomist. I'd like to talk, well, I do have a guy that I might be able to talk to, but anyway, that's what's going on there. Now, there's more red blood is leaking out up here, too. There's got to be a little bit of blood to service. It's up here and over here. Now, this is like the yellow stuff. You see this? That's where there's going to be vein. You see the black here? Anytime you see black, it's vein. Anytime you see red, it's artery. And this is where your yellow stuff grows, you know, on the vein stuff. And there'll be a vein over here somewhere too. So anyway, that's that shot now. And don't forget, I believe it's when they wrinkle and they have to flex, they go into that mode. See that? That looks like a foot to me. That's the heel, and it comes out this way. And when the guy died, you actually can see. Well, I'll show you what you can see. All right, this is outrageous, but it could possibly be true. The more blood you have, the more green you will have. When this guy died, his body just eroded here. I believe this was from the Great Flood, dying from either being starved to death or being boiled to death because it was a hot water flood. But his body would have eroded down here. Now there's a second foot, and I'll show you that where that is in a second. But you see this? There's a lot of red blood here. And there's red blood here, over here, over here. Anywhere you see green growing a lot, there's a lot of red blood. And believe it or not, this guy would have been so big. This is only the tendon. This is only that little bitty tendon coming up to his leg. And so his leg is going to be much bigger than this. His foot is going to be huge. And this could literally be his penis. I'm not kidding you. He's going to be standing up here, huge, gigantic. And whatever this landed, this is a lot of red blood here. A lot of red blood. You know, and that's just what happens. That's all I can say. All right, so here's another one flying over it from an airplane. And that's what the heel looks like. And you see all the red over here? I'll show you what this is. This looks like parts of his ribs or something. But all that green is vital. It's growing wherever it can get nutrition. And at the bottom here is where all those things are going to wrap up. That's gone now. All that flesh is gone. But you're still at the very bottom. You still have the little blood vessels that would have been coming up here. So that's why they're growing some nice green plants right along. You can see it. It's an abrupt transition. Now let's look at what this looks like over here. You see it? Let's take a look at that. See, once again, green, everything green. Now this is red clay, but clay is nothing more than red flesh that has basically eroded. And I think this may be something to do with either muscles. They're probably something to do with muscles. Even though it's as big as it looks, it could just be something to do with muscles. Originally I thought it was something to do with ribs. Who knows? But you see it? All that green stuff, it loves blood. Loves blood. All right, this is what I think happened with the second foot. I think this is actually a foot that was pushed down and is down in deep in the ground. And this is the Devil's Tower right here. And so you've got your heel is still in the ground a little bit and your tendon is coming up. Now this one, the way I'm thinking is it was a very, very hot saltwater, silicate-rich flood for quite a long time. These guys were heavy, very heavy. I mean, just think about how heavy that guy's going to be. Now, he's standing in mud. All right, this is what it was. It was completely all mud because all of the creature's bodies boiled, and the actual flesh is what created mud. It's what's called a red bed, which is all the fleshy stuff, all the really fleshy, red, bloody stuff. And then after that, there was another layer called the gray clay, which is the organs and the bones and the tendon and all, you know, some tougher stuff. But the first stuff that boiled off made that red bed. Then you got the gray clay. And then there was a black cap that landed on top after all the fallout came down. That's the Triassic. And that's when this happened in my mind. So let's think about this. This guy's standing in a hot, soaking, boiling hot water flood. Now, he's either dead from that or he starves to death because there's nothing to eat. What's he going to do? He's in the middle of the... He's standing up. Maybe his head is above the water, but that's probably about it. Now, so he's probably trying to push himself out of the mud. That's my take. And this foot went down deep in the ground, and this one came up. So he's got one down and one up, which is, that's the only way I can think about it. This has a pretty good look to it. That has a pretty good look to it. And he would have pushed himself down, and that stuff would have come down into it. You know, but there's still his heel, basically, but it's way, way, way down. And that might even be the heel bone right there, now that I'm looking at it. You got to just keep looking and looking and looking. You keep finding more and more stuff as you go along. But this makes sense to me because his foot would go down and then there'd be nothing above his foot. And this would sort of collapse into it, more or less. And the leg part coming up, or the tendon part actually, coming up would survive, just like it did over here. That's the only way I can account for the second foot. You see, there's some idiot. When I originally put up about Devil's Tower, some idiot put Devil's Tower on top of these corn roots from corn and said, "Oh, that's all it is a tree." You know, you got to be honest about things and not fake things. All right, I'm going to finish it up with this. I think I've solved my problem about this two different types of tendon. These are not. They don't have any breaks in them. You know, they'll break and fall off, yes, but they're not all like the ones at the bottom where they have to curve and bend. You see how many little breaks there is in there? That's what a tendon normally has when it has to flex and move around. This never flexes. Your heel is as straight up, it's just as tight as it can be. It moves with your leg, but it moves in unison with each other. So it doesn't have to do this or do that. So those are, I don't know whether they end up fusing together because they don't move or whether they're built not to move. And of course there's the blood. The green is always from the red blood. Now, again, I am going to be doing the walls in Peru and so forth, in Bolivia and all down in that area, and they're biology. I can find nothing, even there's nothing. Let me put it this way: at this point, I will make a statement that the universe, not just here, the universe itself is biological. Now, when I say that, you know, what about stars? Well, that's a different issue, but that I can't account for 100% yet either. I can't account for those at all, to be perfectly honest. But as far as I can tell, Mars has the same biology as Earth. And you see this? Let me show you something about Mars. And don't tell me these are not pictures from Mars. I've been doing this long enough so that I understand. This is from Mars, from the Curiosity rover. You see that? Same thing as you got here on Earth. And these are the wrinkle zones on this one. And this is up on Mars. And there's all kinds of stuff. The Mars Morse code, the Mars crab, the Mars blueberries. All biology exactly like it is here on Earth. So I'll probably be showing some of that too. But I do also want, and please, we went to Mars. Curiosity is on Mars. Perseverance is on Mars. I've done a lot of research on this. I know what I'm talking about, and I know, and I can show it, and I do show it, and I still keep getting these people. There's no such thing as. They don't even believe there's space. They don't even believe we get to the space station. I prefer it if you kept that somewhere else. I don't want to argue that. What I'm going to show you is what I'm going to show you. If you disagree with it, that's fine, but don't tell me it doesn't exist and there's no space and there's no space station and all that stuff. Please. I try to be respectful, but this has gone on for 15 years. All right. Can't be any clearer than this. The landscape surrounding Devil's Tower is composed mostly of sedimentary rocks. That means things that have eroded, which a body erodes. The oldest rock visible in Devil's Tower National Monument were laid down in a shallow sea. The whole world was coated with one sea at one time, and it was boiling hot water, and it wasn't necessarily shallow. But they say that it was laid down in a shallow sea during the Triassic. Tri means three, and I'll show you why three is the most important part here. Dark red sandstone and maroon siltstone interbedded with shale, which is gray clay. So you have a red bed, you have gray clay, and then in my case you have a black cap. All right, I'm going to go very slowly on this so you can't possibly miss this. I am in the Connecticut Rift Valley Basin. This is where there is an incredible amount of dinosaur footprints. I am 6 miles from this place where they display them. They're the biggest concentration of dinosaur footprints in the country, I believe. Now, what does this basin consist of? A lower red bed, a gray clay above that, and the black above that. That is what the Triassic with the red beds were deposited. Now, I am going to show you this right here, which has a red bed, gray clay, and then the black cap. And it's got an extraordinary thing in it, which is a human footprint. Okay, like I said, I'm going to go real slow on this. This is the geology surrounding the tower at Devil's Tower. Dark red sandstone, maroon siltstone embedded with shale. Well, what's shale? Well, this is what shale is. Shale is the most abundant of all sedimentary rocks. It is primarily composed of clay, soft clay minerals. It's greenish gray. It's the red bed, gray clay, black cap. That's Triassic. Many include very amounts of organic matter. Yes, calcareous material. That's like the heel bone, calcareous. And quartz grain. Shale may be any color, but it's generally greenish gray to grayish black. So it's a red bed, gray clay, black cap. And that's exactly where I am in the Connecticut area. Okay, this basically ties everything together. This is Devil's Tower. And the oldest rocks around Devil's Tower were laid down in a shallow sea. The whole world was covered by an ocean at this particular time because of the conditions from the Great Flood. It was during the Triassic. Now, all right, let me just read you this, and then it'll make all sense as I go forward. It says the oldest rocks visible in the Devil's Tower were laid down in a shallow sea, during the Triassic era. Triassic means red bed, gray clay, black cap. And this is the dark red sandstone and maroon siltstone interbedded with shale, which is the gray clay. So it's a red and a gray clay. Can be seen along the Belforge River. Then they have iron minerals cause the redness of the rocks. Now, I say this is biology, and this is the Triassic. Well, let's talk about the Triassic. Okay, I'm just going to hit you with my best shot. They're talking about dinosaurs, because they found some little dinosaur footprints. And they had found a ton of them right down the road from me, actually, 6 miles away. And I am right in the same area. I have the same red bed, gray clay, and black cap, which is the Triassic red beds here in Connecticut, famous for it worldwide. However, I have a human footprint in between the red bed and the black cap, which means everything was wet at the same time. This all happened very quickly. It wasn't a very long duration thing. And this was a worldwide flood, and they agree with this now. And it caused exceptional preservation of soft-bodied creatures promoted by these silica-rich oceans. And the reason it was silica-rich is because the fiery comet, which later turned out to be Venus, almost hit Earth. And it literally boiled the oceans. This is written in a number of places, and I'm going to show you right in a second. And then there was the Great Flood, because all of the turmoil happened. Now, when that happened, the silica, which they can't account for, they said this was an anomaly, they have no idea why. The silica came up from the bottom of the ocean. Silica is heavy as hell. You take a bottle of silica, and it weighs much more than a bottle of water. So it sinks, and there's a layer like a mile thick or something, and that all supersaturated the water, which caused the mud fossils, a lot of veins, quartz veins. Those aren't quartz veins, those are veins filled with silicon dioxides. Literally, I'm not kidding you. And a lot of the things that we always consider like crystals and so forth, those are also silicates with transition metals in them. All right, those are your gemstones. I'm going to go over all of this stuff. Like I said, I'm going to take my time, so if you're not interested, do something else. But I'm going to go with this carefully, methodically, and show you what they are saying here. And this is Yale University. Now, I had submitted my work to them long before they put this paper out, which is basically the exact same thing. Now, they're saying these are the earliest fossilized complex creatures. It occurs in this, they named it themselves, where it's worldwide. It's in the Triassic layer. How the fossils are preserved remains controversial. No, I know exactly how they are, and I'm willing to debate that with anyone. These consist of exceptionally preserved soft-bodied creatures. Many of them fossil, or whatever that means, preserved as cast in sandstone. They're in the mud. Here we present evidence for this preservation was due to rapid early stage precipitation, which means a lot of water, with silica cements, which means all that silica, which facilitated by the high silica saturation. My paper was called Fascia Facilitated Fossilization. All right, so they facilitated by the high silica saturation, which I had in my paper too, 50 times higher, of the oceans prior to the appearance of this silica biomineralizers. They mineralize. The silicas cause things to turn into stone. An early silification model provides a coherent mechanism and empirically supported explanation for the widespread preservation of soft-bodied organisms. This is what they are. They're everywhere. The presence of early silification confirms fossils can provide an accurate window into life on the seafloor. The whole world was a seafloor that can be used to reconstruct critical steps in the development of early animal ecosystems. And when then it goes on to yada, yada, yada. But they talk about this here in their paper on the Yale campus paper at the same time touting that they found all this stuff. And they say it might have been a failed evolutionary experiment, which it was. Basically, it was. It had to be wiped out. These giants were everywhere. You'd like to understand these bizarre creatures that do not resemble any organisms alive today, many of them. All right? Maybe it was some sort of a failed evolutionary experiment. It was. All right? They say they were all soft-bodied. That's not true. There was all kinds of creatures here, and they were giant, and they had bones, and they had all the other things. So they say there was all entirely soft-bodied. Wrong. They say what they try to realize was there was much richer in dissolved silica than they are today. Yeah, and the reason was because we almost got hit by Venus, and the whole Earth twisted and distorted, basically, and it caused all kinds of volcanoes, and the whole water's boiled. And that's written in the text, as I will show you, Uno Momento. It says it enabled transformation of loose mud around the animals into rock to occur in a matter of hours or years rather than millions of years. All of the things that I discovered, and I presented them to Yale long ago, long ago. And then NASA funded this, because I presented it to NASA too. They must have wondered if I was crazy, because I sent all this information, and I mean I had DNA and CAT scans and everything else. So nobody can call me crazy and stand in front of me and do it. All they can do is hide in the woods and call me crazy, and that's what they're doing now. All right, as I showed you about 1,000 times here, there's a red bed, gray clay, and a black cap. That's the Triassic. The red bed is like down here. There's a gray clay above it, and then black cap comes over the top of that. This is exactly the zone I'm in. And here's what I have to show you right now, is a footprint pushed down through the red bed. So the gray clay is down at the bottom where the red bed should be, and it's a human footprint. So that means that the red bed and the gray clay and the black cap, which landed on here, and there's no erosion whatsoever on the footprint, they all had to have happened just like that. That would account for Venus almost hitting us, having this disastrous flood and boiling the flesh off of the creatures. The first thing that would come off would be the muddy, bloody flesh, and that created the red bed. The next thing that came is what they call the marl. It's calcaneous stuff. That means it's tendons and bones and all kinds of stuff. And that came down and settled down next. And then all the fallout from the burning and ashes and stuff landed on top here. So in between the red bed, which is the flesh settling, and the gray clay settling on top of that, everything was fine originally. There would be the red bed, the gray clay, and a guy came running through here, landed on on the gray clay, and pushed it down. So he was still alive while these two events were just unfolding. And then the black cap came down and landed on top of that. I have these things right here. All right, that's the footprint. Whoops. All right, here's what I have right here. This is the human footprint, and it's pushed down through the red bed, which it should not be, and it's perfectly formed, so it had to be wet at the same time. This had to be wet to get out of the way as it pushed the gray down, and then the black cap came and landed, all came down on top of everything. All right, when I found this was on top of the footprint, just like it would be in nature, and this was completely surrounded by this red bed, and I mean it's red. You see that? This is just nothing more than boiled off flesh. All right, now that would have been right across here, red bed, red bed. Now let's think about it for a second. If this was gray clay another inch or two above it, well, the thickness of this, and the guy stepped on it, and he pushed that gray clay through this red bed. This would have had to still be wet. It had to be pushed and gushed out of the way, and the gray pushed down through it and pushed all the away, and it became where the red bed should be. So it replaced the red bed. Now I'll show you that on the side. You see the gray clays on the bottom? That's not supposed to be there. That's supposed to still be this red bed, which was up here. But it pushed it out of the way because the guy stepped on it. And that's his footprint right there. Now, so here is what his footprint looks like. You see that? Those are the balls of his feet. This is so perfect. It's absolutely flawlessly anatomically perfect. Now, I don't think there's any toes in here, which fits for the model of the no toes. We have no toes, and they don't have toes, but they look just like a normal human foot. And as a matter of fact, I have a shot of one. Well, I have one here. And this still has the little bumps in here. I call them suck-ups. And what happened was this had to still be a little bit wet when he stepped on it. And it pulled up these little suck-ups here, but not on the edge. You see how smooth it is over here and how smooth it is over here? There was no suction there, but there was in the center, and that has remained. I should show you that. Hold on. All right, here's his footprint. There's the balls of his feet. This is amazing. And you see all these little dimply looking things? I don't know how well you can see those, but they're little dimple looking things. Those are what I call the suck-ups. Now I'm going to go to the side over here. You see the side? It's kind of flat. There is no real big suck-ups there. But you go to the center and you have all those big suck-ups. The other side, same thing, flat. And the only reason is because the center of his foot is what pulled up all that goo. Now, if you can see there, and you should be able to, this gray. You see that gray? That's the same gray as is down here, because this gray got pushed down through the red bed. And this was the red bed. There's no other way to do it. That's it. Now this, when I found it, was on top of this. And I just opened it up like that, and it just opened up, and that's it. It'll fit right in there. I mean, it was exactly flawlessly attached to this, because that's the fallout. This is all fallout from the black soot and the volcanoes and all that stuff. So that's the red bed. All right, I got cut off. Okay, a little interruption there, but I showed you the red bed, the gray clay, the black cap, and I showed you that there's a human footprint in between the three of them, and all three of them had to have happened almost at the same time, because there's no erosion off of this gray clay, which is on top of this, the red bed, and pushed through. So that had to be wet, that had to be wet. This didn't erode, that landed on top very quickly. When I say very quickly, I mean, I'm talking, I don't know, a couple of years? I don't know. I have no idea. But there's three distinct layers. Very, very clear three distinct layers. That's why they named it the Triassic. All right, you've seen, I think, this hair follicle. All of this came from right off my property here. This is a hair follicle from some gigantic creature. And that's the erector pili muscle attached there. This is where the sebaceous gland was, slid down the shaft. There's the hair shaft coming out. This is the root, and there is the vein and artery, those two little spots on the bottom. This is, there's no question about it, it's a hair follicle. That's pretty big. So there was some gigantic creatures here. I mean, absolutely gigantic. And this is also off my property. And this is a tendon fibril. And I've shown this in pretty good detail. And there's still, you can see where the blood was and sort of ran down this way because it's settled down here. And this is the same stuff you're going to see again at Devil's Tower when we get into looking at Devil's Tower. It has that same skin around it, which is small leucine-rich proteins, so that they can slide within that skin. You know, I'm showing some pretty solid evidence here. Very solid evidence. So, and when I say solid, I mean in more than one way. So we had, I don't know how much more I can convince you or show you. So now we need to start to talk about, how did this happen? How did that form? What is that? All right, we got to take a new look at everything. How did this form? Why does it flare out at the bottom like that? Why is it all wrinkly looking here? Why we got some red and green things growing here and there? All right, what's this all about? How did that happen? These are the kind of things we got to start digging in and looking. I showed you that huge artery. That's 4 inches across, and there it is right there. That's what an artery is. This is not a joke, and it's just not even being looked at. There's the artery right there. It's the same thing. It's just identical, and the blood is still in the other one. It's still saturated with blood. That's a big artery. These are big creatures. They were gigantic creatures. That's all I can tell you. And that's exactly what was written in the past. And there wasn't just one of them, or 2 of them, or 10 of them. They were all over the place. This is another one. It's called Devil's Postpile. You see these little wrinkly looking things? That's the wrinkle zone. And when you cut a tendon off, it goes boing, and it wrinkles. And here's what it looks like right there. There's the heel at Devil's Tower, and it comes up, and then you have your wrinkle zone. There's one at the top too, but that's gone. And it depends on where it breaks. It could break up higher, but it's not too high on Devil's Tower. It's not way up. All right, this is Devil's Tower right here. This is that heel bone. All right, it comes up like this to the tendon, and it's snapped. And this is the wrinkle zone. These are the fibrils, just like I have here. Only mine didn't get wrinkly because it just was laying flat. All right, but it's the same stuff. There's a little bit of a wrinkle here, but not much. All right, here it was, you know, all of that weight coming down when it was still wet ended up giving you a wrinkle all the way, probably all the way down here. I'm not sure, but this you can see. That's that edge again. You see the edge right there? That's the edge that comes right off. I think I showed this before, or I will show you in the microscope. That's the Slurpee. The whole thing had to move in and out of there. Not much. They didn't slide, you know, forever. They just enough so that they could move back and forth among themselves. Pretty much this was the slippery part that slipped in and out against the other fibers. The fiber inside, I don't think moved a whole lot inside this, but this against that, yes, these would move, and they have to be glued together in one manner, but they still have to move and be able to flex, because when you twist and flex, there's this kind of a movement. So that's what this is all about. Okay, this is way beyond outrageous. This is Petra. I think I've shown you in this presentation, but I've been showing it a lot because it's nothing but muscle. That's all muscle. And you see these little blocks? I've shown it a million times, and that is an artery. This is what feeds the blood to the other muscles. This whole thing is muscle, all of that. All of these little blocks. Now, can I show this in a body? Yes, I can. What? Look at this. Here it is right here. The same thing. It runs the blood in through here, all through these little areas, and that could be right where Petra is. There's a big scab of blood coming right off of there, it looks like to me. This is just the way it works. Your body has to have blood. Now, I've shown a million times, I think I showed it before. These are muscle sarcomeres, these little blocks, and that's exactly what's at Petra. And one more time, let's look at Petra, just be sure you don't miss this. These are all those little blocks. And these are big channels running through here. And that was an artery, which was a hole right through there where the blood came out to service all this. Now watch this. This is the same thing, only in microscopic. This is where all the blood went around to service everything through these cracks and so forth. And that, I think, right there is Petra. You see it? That's like a blood scab coming off of a hole, which I would think could very well be an artery. These are muscle sarcomeres. This is where the blood runs. Looks like it to me. All right, I don't think I mentioned this, but you see this little bend right here and this little bend over here? You see how this color changes here? There's like an abrupt transition between certain areas of tendons, and then they go into different areas. Now this just could be the way the light's hitting it, or it could actually be the transition zone. But I believe this is the transition zone right here, where that's the weak part, or the part that would break. So you'd have your heel bone in the ground and this high sticking up out of it, which is all these little tendon fibers. You see them? And that's what we see at Devil's Tower, about that much sticking up. It's not a whole lot, because a lot of this is buried in the ground. A lot of Devil's Tower is in the ground, the heel. Well, actually, when you look at it, not a whole lot is in the ground. There's some, but not a whole lot. This is where it comes in, and it goes up, and it breaks off right there. So this would have been a ball. So think of how big a ball would be to go in the ground. And these little green areas are where there was little blood vessels feeding blood up into the tissues, and they now are growing things in these blood vessels. The blood vessels, that's a lot of things will grow right in the blood vessels. They don't need a lot of nutrition. Like right there, there's going to be a tiny little blood vessel there. And then when you see all the green moss and everything running down the sides, you know that there was some red blood fed that. Red blood makes green things. All right, this is from a different type of body fluid. Normally it's going to be from a certain vein blood, and it changes all over your body. Depends on how many metals are in there and how much it's the moss grows on vein blood. The fluffy green things grow in red blood, like these. All right, the Kolbrin Bible was basically dated back to the Celtics and the Egyptians and all that. And the return of a massive space object in long elliptical orbit around our sun, known to the Egyptians and Hebrews as the Destroyer. The Celtics later called it the Frightener. Now listen to this. Here's the actual passages from the Egyptian text. Manuscript 3.4. When blood drops upon the earth, the Destroyer will appear, and mountains will open up and belch forth fire and ashes. Trees will be destroyed. This is where all the trees, but almost all of them are gone. And all living things engulfed. Waters will be swallowed up by the land, and seas will boil. The seas will boil, exactly, because we almost got hit by Venus. Now, listen to this. The heavens will burn brightly and redly. There will be a copper hue over the face of the land, followed by a day of darkness. A new moon will appear and break up and fall. Well, I don't know about that, but I can tell you one thing. It appears that the Earth did more or less stop in its spinning, because its impact with Venus's atmosphere pushed its atmosphere against it. So it's spinning this way, Venus is spinning this way, it hit it, and between the two of them, they both got impacted, but the Earth basically stopped, because they said followed by a day of darkness. All right. People will scatter in madness. They'll hear the trumpet and battle cry of the Destroyer, seek refuge within dens in earth. Terror will eat away their hearts, and their courage will flow from them like water from a broken pitcher. They will be eaten up in the flames of wrath and consumed by the breath of the destroyer. Manuscript 3:10. In those days men will have the great book before them. Wisdom will be revealed. Few will be gathered for the stand. It is the hour of trial. The dauntless ones will survive. The stout-hearted will not go down to destruction. This is what was written in these ancient texts. It's pretty serious sounding stuff.